We are live. We are live. We are live. I have my water ready. Well, wait a minute. Let me get this a little tighter. It's a little bit tighter. There we go. People was a little nippy today. You know, spring faked us out. We thought it was time. I was just about to go in that crawl space, get out the winter stuff, get out the summer stuff, put the winter stuff away, and then we get hit with this. So I had to put the fitted sweater on with the Les Chapeau to keep my head warm. But before we go a bit further, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of the universe, children of God, I bring forth to you the good times. And today is another bourbon, but it's mixed with something. Normally I'd like my bourbon neat, but today I wanted a little flavor, a little hum to it. And of course I have my water ready. That way the throat dries up. I can satiate it. But that said, let's bring this all down. Actually, I'm gonna let that rock a second more while I do take care of a little business. So I'm a self-published author, and I have an autobiography, again, self-published, and there it is there. I was never quite black enough. That title usually gets some chuckles, and when I hear those chuckles, it tells me that the person chuckling has an idea what it's about. Maybe one show I'll get into it a bit more. I certainly have on the page, I have a 2 chapters of the book that I voiced over myself. I'm not sure how thrilling it is, but nonetheless, some of you are partial to audiobooks. So, oh wait a minute, music's about to finish. So let me bring that down. Some of you are partial to audiobooks, so you can hear a couple chapters, but just a couple. I can't give it away, the whole thing away for free, but you get to hear a couple chapters. I might even redo them just to give them a little more oomph. But like I said, it's at the website. But oh, let me take that down. I'm way too long on that cover. Let me take that down. There we go. And then I have a fiction work called The GEU, the Gang Extermination Unit. And that's a second cover, as I ask in other broadcasts. And on this one, I have 2 covers. So I'm going to take that one down and put this one up. And you tell me, just take a second and put in the comments in the chat which cover that you like better. Speaking of comments, now I have to train myself to look there. All right, so back to business. So we have, that's the second cover. And then what does the back look like? Oh, I put the back over here. Here it is. So that's, no, it's not the back cover. And I can actually get rid of that. There's the back cover. So, and that gives you an idea of the characters in this fiction book and a little hint about what goes on in it. But again, you're going to have to read to know the whole story, and it is exciting. So let's get that off stage. That doesn't need to be there. That doesn't need to be there. Neither does that. So, old business. So over the last few weeks, I've had people on, and I'll go first with these 2 ladies who will be returning this coming Monday, which is the 27th. Oh boy, I got to make sure of that. Yeah, I'm going to say the 27th, both Priscilla and Mo will be back. And I know these guests were popular with the gentry at large. The guys loved the pleasing on the eye ladies commenting on things. But when they come on this week, when they come on the 27th, it's going to be more towards a more serious topic. When they were here 3 weeks ago, it was discussing catcalling, wolf calling, and harassment, public harassment, social harassment by men attempting to approach women or hit on women, as we commonly say in the streets. Drink your water, people. It's good for you. And they gave some commentary on that. And I think I have a couple of clips from that. So I'll give you a little piece of that. Here, try this out. Here is from older who were single again to younger guys who are out there full of testosterone and getting after it. There were these discussions about how one guy would get a response, but then the next guy would get a negative response. So you had a positive versus negative response, sometimes with the same woman, which then made me wonder, is it because of who it's coming from? Was it how it was done or that sort of thing? So I just wanted to cut in there, Mo. So you go ahead and give me some more.
No, I mean, you were spot on with that. You know, it's who it's coming from and how it's coming. So even if it's a person you're not interested in, if that person catcalled in a cute way or the right way, you get a little smile or, you know, and it was somebody just like, you know, or you didn't, or even if you liked that person, Lisa.
So that was a little bit for Mo. And then continuing on with the same clip, I'm going to get back to it. There we go. And give you some from Priscilla.
You know, if you're from an urban environment, right? Because I think you might get this more in an urban type environment.
Yep.
You know, you walk down, you get the "Hey, mommy," or "Hey, baby," or whatever. You know.
Wait a minute. The "hey," because I remember that back in the Bronx, especially with the Puerto Rican cast. "Hey, mommy." I remember that.
Yeah. Now, as a Latina, if it's coming from a Latin guy, there's even their tones and the way they say it that would actually determine what the response would be. Yes. If you're across the street and they're like, "Hey, mommy," and they kind of off a little rude, you know, you're like, "Yeah, whatever." But if they turn on that little Latin charm and they're like, "Hey, mommy," you know, then you're like, "Whoa, wait a minute."
All right, so that was interesting perspective. And let me get that out of there for a moment and try this clip.
Catcalling and wolf whistling, by definition, are both considered forms of public sexual harassment and intimidation. And
Officer Sanchez is coming out.
You know, so just by definition, you know, I don't think I've ever really seen.
So, you know, Priscilla put on her law enforcement officer hat and gave us the legal the legal repercussions or the legal infraction of when you holler at a chick in the streets, because technically it's what she say, public sexual harassment. And wasn't there one more clip I had? Is this it? No, that's still it. Let me go back here. Remember, people, I'm still learning this as I'm doing it, but I think I'm getting better. So those were the ladies. And then on the 27th, they're going to come in and we're going to talk about small business and politics. And politics tends to get hot. So here's the ground rules, which they know the rules and they are very ladylike, so they won't violate it. But on the Q show, we don't do vulgarity, insults, or yelling. We're going to have discourse. It's going to be civil discourse. All right. If you're going to come in right away hot, you're going to come in hot, so to speak. that's not going to be welcome, and I'll shut it down. So if you want to drop comments that day and present facts and data, as my guest on last week's show, retired Chief Warrant Officer 5 Daniel Doctor, stated, facts trumps your emotions and feelings. And speaking of which, here's a scene from last week's show, and that was myself. Well, of course, it's me. It's my show. And retired Colonel, United States Army Reserve, Roger Glenn, and retired Chief Warrant Officer 5, Daniel Doctor. And they gave a lot of very sobering and knowledgeable insight with data, statistics, and information about the mid to upper level of leadership and what's going on in the military. Now, that was a 5-part discussion. 2 of the topics were a bit lighter. We talked about the Army going back to the World War II uniform, or as I like to call it, the throwback. And we also talked about standards and that sort of thing, which gets everyone going, especially the NCO Corps. All right, so not to belabor that, because this is the Monday check-in. So on the Monday check-in, what are we checking in on? So one of the things that
calling and wolf whistling has actually worked.
Oh, stop.
But the softer approach.
I beg your pardon. Like I said, I'm building it as I'm flying it. So we're going to get that out the way. Friends like me, they're married and kind of off the market. So we're not doing that sort of thing. All right, so that's out of there. There we go. So the Monday check-in is about a topic that has been bugging me. I believe that the enemies of the United States of America are in America. Those of us who have served in roles where you had to take an oath all are familiar with the phrase enemies defending the Constitution in the United States of America, and the Constitution against enemies foreign and domestic. And I believe now that our enemies have penetrated our borders, either physically, ideologically, financially, intellectually, or most insidiously from an intelligence standpoint. And when I say intelligence, most notably, Eric Swalwell, representative from California, has gotten himself into trouble again. This time, he's up for charges on sexual harassment or even rape. But this is not his first go-round. And his first go-round was when he was associated with a female intelligence agent of the Chinese Communist Party who went by the nickname Fang Fang. Don't ask me her actual, Christine Fang, right? That was her actual name, Christine Fang. But she was referred to as Fang Fang, and she was hired by Swalwell's campaign in that the year he was running for office as an assistant, and she worked her way real close to him. And I'm going to give you 3 guesses on how she did that. She also worked her way into the good graces of a campaign. I can't think of the politician now, but it was someone in the southern Midwest, maybe Oklahoma, Texas. And she worked her way into that campaign, but it was based off of a recommendation and vouch from the Swalwell people. And when it was discovered and brought to Representative Swalwell's attention that this young, vibrant woman, Chinese woman, was an agent of the CCP, again, Chinese Communist Party. He was unbelieving, resistant. Eventually, it became irrefutable. And he still defended his relationship with her, and then defended, his defense was that he had not shared any information of value with this woman, who was then ejected from the country. And by the way, she died in a plane crash about 3-4 years ago. No, it's not even 3 years. I'm going to say 2 years ago. So now here he is in trouble again. And how was he in this position to be in trouble again? Because the first time when it was divulged, and this was a very public story, that he was involved with Fang Fang, not only did he, what's the term I heard? Defend, deny, distort. The Democrat Party, the DNC, Democrat National Committee, came to his defense, and other prominent Democrats also came to his defense to keep him out of trouble. Now, had they let that man sink, would he have been around again to engage in this behavior and disrupt California politics? Now, I'm not brokenhearted that he's disrupted California politics, because the whole state of California has become a very serious problem, almost to the point that when I wrote my essay called The National Divorce, I stated in that essay that California maybe should just become its own country. They get what they want. Sorry, y'all. I had to adjust because that was really uncomfortable the way I was sitting. Much better. The host, you know what? I'm in the house now. I can take that off. So the whole state of California has been a problem. It needs to be its own country. And not only should it be its own country, San Francisco should become its own country in and of itself. But you can go to queenpublishing.pub, P-U-B, and look at that essay. Matter of fact, let me get Queen Publishing up there. Here we go. No, not that. I want the ticker. Yeah. So you can go to queenpublishing.pub and look up the essay entitled A National Divorce. Now, I know a lot of people don't want to do a bunch of reading, but we are in times where you're going to have to get back to the essentials of reading. I do a good deal of reading. It slowed down a bit when I finished my degree, but now I'm picking back up on it. All right, so we're done with Swalwell and Fang Fang, but we're not done with the whole topic of the enemies of America are in America. And I believe that's what we're seeing in our culture. Every time you turn on the news, you read a newspaper, you get a notification on your device there, which you got to be careful what's coming across on your device. Don't believe everything you see. And that doesn't mean discount everything you see either. You have to be discerning, have a spirit of discernment. And because once you do a good amount of reading, you're able to kind of sort through things and detect what is propaganda and what may be real. So every time we turn on any of these sources of information, of news, it's a little cold for the ice cream truck partner, but okay, you can do that. I hope y'all don't hear the ice. Well, maybe you want to hear the ice cream truck. At least get you hopeful of what's to come. When you take in this media, when you consume news, no matter what the format, we're seeing protests. Now, protesting is supposed to be part of the American system. It's a right. But I think it's been, like many things, it's been abused. It's been expanded beyond its original definition. A protest was the right of the people to go down to City Hall or their local politician's office and make a sign and say, we don't like what you're doing. And now protests are people with noise-making devices creating unnatural sounds that disturb the public peace. We're blocking roads. We're blocking bridges. We're impeding the flow of society. That's not protest. That is harassment. That is subversion. So being I'm talking about subversion, let me get to this. Oh, yeah, there we go. I'm going to put this on screen for a moment. There we go. So, U.S. Code 18, Chapter 115, treason, sedition, and subversive activities, crimes and criminal procedures. So now I'm not going to bore you all by reading all of the legal jargon, but I'm going to go down to do a search here on subversion. I guess we're having class, right? Crimes and criminal procedure. All right, so there's only 2 hits, so they in the actual law, we don't see the word. They just put it under the rubric of treason. Advocating overthrow of government. Does everyone see that? Let me highlight it. Advocating overthrow of government. And that's what we're hearing in some of these protests. And because there is a right to protest, it doesn't mean that everything you say and do within the execution of the protests is in line with the law. And because we have an electorate that's polarized and divided, these things are not being addressed. And this is happening in a number of ways and situations. So let me see if there's any key points I want to catch in this. A description of a more voluminous, a more specific description, which I'm sure it's there. I just don't want to bore all of you with this, and I don't want this to run too long. Editorial, seditious conspiracy. If 2 or more persons in any state or territory or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States, contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. Now, that applies to a few situations. That applies to people who I may share political views with, but they took it a step too far. That is a shot from the January 6th incident. And what word is used to describe it depends on the commentary or the commenter. So it was an insurrection, it was a riot, it was a rebellion, depending on who you're talking to. Nonetheless, though these people in this photograph, who I may share a political view with, though I share that view, that they rated, that's the word I'll go with, that they rated the Capitol was unacceptable. It was embarrassing on the world stage, and you harmed our movement. And what is that movement? That is the movement of conservatism, of which I am one. Let me drink to that again. I am a conservative. Make no mistake. A conservative. Man, the ice cream truck's making the second pass. So that gave fuel to the fire for behavior such as this. And you see that. You see the flags. You know what that is. You see the rainbow. You know what that is. You see the back out, a grown man in the back out like he's Liza Minnelli in Chicago on Broadway. And right here, I will say this, in this photo, they are just protesting. But if we take this a step further, how many times have we seen this with people of that political persuasion go a lot further and too far, which is why we had 2 American citizens shot by U.S. Customs Enforcement. No, I'm not Customs. Was it a Customs officer or ICE officer? Do not confuse the 2 agencies. We'll go with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and then you have Border and Customs, CBP, Cordon Busters, Custom and Border Patrol, and then you have Immigration Control, Immigration Customs Enforcement. Anyhow, we had 2 Americans shot by officers representing each agency because they didn't realize it, but they went way past the description of a protest is and wandered into, let me go back to the top here one more time and throw this on screen so everyone remembers. You see that there? They wandered into subversive treason, sedition, and subversive activities. Why would we say that? Well, they were blocking traffic. They were impeding these officers in the execution of their federally mandated activities. That's a crime. So if you're going to appear outside their facility and stand off 100 feet and form a picket line and protest and make your presence known and your disapproval vocal, you're within your bounds to do that. But if now you're going to violate the barricade, and as their vehicles are pulling into their facility, you're going to block them and break windows and slam things and get away with it because we have a divided government, that doesn't make it right. Make no mistake, you are getting away with a crime that eventually the long arm of the law, you've heard that term before, the long arm of the law is eventually going to grab you by your collar at a minimum and drag you off to a courtroom, hopefully a conviction, and then take your stupid, almost said a bad word, take your carcass to jail. People, the enemies of America, are in America because they have no clue what America is, what this does to our position on the world stage. You are interfering with American life, and you're disrupting the ability of our government to interact with the other civilized governments of the world. You're not accomplishing any more than that. Now, a couple more things I want to drop on you. All right, so I'm going to share this screen. See, what's supposed to happen in American society is this. Share screen. Nope. Share screen. Right, that's what I'm looking for. Allow. Assimilation. Noun, the process of taking in and fully understanding information or ideas. The process of becoming similar to some things, not the same. Similar and same or have different meanings. You're becoming similar. And what we're having a problem with is there are too many rivers leading into Rome. That's a quote I heard about 3 weeks ago, and I kind of like it. Because what that quote means is that now you have water coming from the mountains, water coming from upriver, water coming from the ocean, water coming from a lake, all intermixing in Rome and changing what Rome is. Folks, whether you love it as I do, or you hate it as some of my peers and colleagues hate, America is a Western nation built on Western culture. And when one comes to this country, your role, your responsibility is assimilation. Right there. Assimilation. The process of becoming similar. You don't have to be the same, but you should be similar. Maybe you don't like football. Maybe you prefer soccer, but you better recognize football is out. American football is the national sport. Baseball is the national sport. So when you start doing soccer, enjoy yourself. Have no problem with it. Now, I'm just using those as examples. But what I'm pointing out is there's a tendency for immigrants, especially our later immigrants, not necessarily the earlier immigrants, to come to America and try to reform our culture and society into, let me take this down, and that give me a chance to cool off if I get too loud. Come to America and try to reform our society into what they left back there, that in some cases they ran to get away from. You're not supposed to be coming to America to reform some new version of your country in America. You bring pieces of it. Americans love cuisine. We love different kinds of music. We like different styles sometime. But you incorporate that into what we are already doing. Not you just going to create a whole new, what's that fictional country that used to be on that Ren and Stimpy show? Quintatania. You're not going to try to recreate Quintatania culture in America. No, what you're going to do is adapt and assimilate, the word we just went through, to American culture. Every group of immigrants through history has done that quite well. Today, Americans love pasta and we love pizza, but you talk to an Italian and you not just talk to, if you interact with Italians, for all intents and purposes, they are full Americans. Even, you know what, let me go back because I know I have a couple of sharpshooters who go, well, Italians have been here for 100 years. What about the first Italians? The first Italians, very similar to our Central American immigrants or illegal aliens. I said or because immigrants and illegal aliens are not the same thing, even though some of you liars try to make them the same. But those early Italian immigrants, they spoke Italian, but they came here to become Americans. Now, did they bring some aspects of their culture with them that were unsavory? Sure. Organized crime, unfortunately, was one of the baggages that the Italians brought with them. But eventually, they evolved out of it. Not completely. I'm not going to say that the organized crime element of Italian culture no longer exists. Let me wet the whistle here. But it's not nearly what it was before. And most Italians that I have interacted with intimately, citizen of New York, United States Army, deal with people from every kinds of background. And most Italians, if not all, are dedicated Americans. You could say that about the Irish, who went through their period of struggle. But when they came to America, they came to become Americans. Now, did they have baggage? Sure. If you went up to the Northeast, now this is not something I witnessed. This comes from my studies in counterterrorism. There was a time where if you went to, let's say, a store, a restaurant, or any business in the Northeast that was in an Irish neighborhood, there would be a donation cup that said, "For the boys." And we now know that "For the boys" was a reference to the Irish Republican Army. Nonetheless, they had love for their brothers back in Ireland who were fighting the crown, but they were here to be Americans. We say that about the Irish, about the Italians. You could say that about the early Caribbean immigrants. But something began to happen in the 70s where it became acceptable to hate the country that you immigrated to hate the country that you were born in. Because this is not simply, even though I described immigrant culture, this is not unique to immigrants. We have white Americans whose families trace back to the beginnings of this country, who now seek to overthrow it, to disrupt it. They are our enemies. The enemies are in the wire. Military people know what term usually goes there, but I'm not going to do that. Enemies in the wire. Enemies in the wire. We now are faced with people who we need to fight are not out there. They are in here among us, working against us to subvert the country. They are not assimilating. What they are doing is, and let me throw this up there, that what they are doing is infiltrating. The action of entering or gaining access to an organization or place surreptitiously, especially in order to acquire secret information or cause damage. So we have enemies from outside infiltrating and causing damage. We have citizens who are inside all their lives who are subverting our nation. They're working against us. And it's heartbreaking because, as many of my military brethren will tell you, some of the people who complain about America the loudest have not seen the world's armpit. I've been to countries that have been through civil wars, outright wars, destruction. You have no idea how good you have it. I challenge you to talk to a veteran and have them describe to you what they saw in other nations of the world that were in conflict. I'm not talking about someone who was stationed in Germany on an American base in a developed and non-controversial Western nation. I'm talking about veterans who have been to, like I was, Kosovo, who've been to Bosnia, who've been to Iraq, Afghanistan, have been to some of the contested areas of South Asia. You don't know what you have until you're deep in it, and then it's too late. Infiltration, people. Let me throw that up there one more time. Infiltration. All right, so now I'm not going to talk about that again. Already covered that. Finally, talking about the enemies of America within America, I'm going to bring this to your attention. I'm not sure if the audio is going to play, but I brought up the transcript so I can read it. So this is a gentleman by the name of Yuri Bezmenov. Yuri Bezmenov. And he was a Soviet KGB agent who defected to the West. And when he came to the West, he shared with the Central Intelligence Agency some of what transpired when he was a KGB agent and how they were attempting to subvert America. Again, I'm not sure if the sound will play, so I'm just going to read the transcript. So the area, now this is him speaking. The area of its intelligence at all according to my opinion and the opinion of many defectors of my caliber. Oh, I need water. Hang on. Is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures. Activeness in the language of the KGB or psychological warfare, what it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow and divided into 4 basic stages. The first being demoralization. It takes 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy, in other words, Marxism. This nonsense that we're seeing in our news media, no matter which form you consume it in, really began to pick up steam 20 years ago. We had candidates openly, and today openly, declaring themselves socialists or Marxists, which more than 20 years ago, they would have been ashamed. They wanted nothing to do with that label. And now they openly state it. And here is a Soviet KGB agent telling you that this was their work to take down the country. Why? Because, let me go back a bit. And I'll paraphrase it because I don't want to read too much. But basically, a little bit before that, he states that the way the KGB performs subversion is not the sexiness you see in movies, but more so penetrating your culture and influencing it so that you hate your country and your government. And that it gets more traction than what you may see in a James Bond thriller. And essentially, they penetrate student movements. Where are most of these protests and this subversive behavior we're seeing? Where is it originating? Student movements, some of these colleges and universities that have forgotten that they are Americans, and now they're part of an enemy movement. And he says later in this interview, that's exactly what they did. They recruited students, professors. They're those damn professors again. I know I don't curse. Damn is not really a high intensity curse word, so, but pardon me. Anyhow, Yuri Bezmenov, and the title of that is Full Interview with Yuri Bezmenov. You can find it on YouTube. The 4 stages of ideological subversion. Or remember earlier I mentioned the previous guest I had on the show, Priscilla Sanchez. And when I talked to her individually, and I believe the title of that was Are Hispanics Regretting Their Trump Vote? She talked about PSYOPs. And that's what this man is describing. PSYOPs. This is how they work to take down America. So let me see if there are any other nuggets I can give to you real quick. The situation of demoralization, America. So basically, America is stuck with demoralization. And unless you start right now, here this minute, if you don't start educating your new generation of Americans, it would take you 15 to 20 years to turn the tide. Now, here's a ranking agent in a foreign intelligence agency describing to you in detail the campaign that they undertook to destroy, well, maybe not destroy America, but definitely to knock us down. All right, so I'm going to leave that there. Here's a movement that was infiltrated. So in the midst of my counterterrorism studies, I took a totally unrelated class in African American history, 1877 to today. And one of the critical periods in Black history, African American history, whichever we're calling it, you know, my rap changes from time to time. One of the critical periods was in the 1920s, similar to the time of the Harlem Renaissance, where the first Central and Eastern European Marxists and socialists were immigrating to America, and they employed a strategy that is in The Art of War, written by Sun Tzu. And that strategy is to find the disgruntled in the enemy camp and enlist them to spy for you and to work for you, to undermine your enemy. And this was done with the Black Civil Rights Movement. I'm not talking about the 50s. I'm talking about the 20s. This was when W.E.B. Du Bois was coming of notoriety. The Harlem Renaissance was taking place, and there was a great migration of Blacks from the South, from an agrarian economy, to the North, an industrial economy. And these Marxists saw in the Black community people who were accurately being, not accurate, what's the word I'm looking for? Being mistreated, abused, oppressed. And that is 100% correct. Black people were catching hell. Now, we had standouts and we had examples of success, but for each one of those, you have a Tulsa massacre, or Rosewood, or many of the other incidents where whites felt that Blacks were doing too well and sought to slow down their success or outright kill them because they couldn't stand to see it. But not to go too far down that path. So these Marxists from Eastern Europe, many of them Jew, embraced these Black civil rights activists who were, I'm not going to say first wave, because waves are really a term that's used with the feminist movement. But for sake of discussion, I'll say second wave of Black civil rights. Again, this is during the 20s. And these Marxists got together or embraced W.B. Du Bois, and I believe it was an Eastern European Jew who helped form the NAACP. And so that began the Black population's migration. Not began, I shouldn't say began. That was the second wave of Blacks migrating from the Republican Party to the Democrat Party. The first wave came with the election of William McKinley in the last decade of the 1800s. And I'm not going to go through all that. Again, I want to get through this. But the second wave began during the 20s when these Marxists, who sought to find that word that I hate so much, intersectionality, and they found the intersection with these oppressed Blacks and say, hey, maybe we could work together against this evil government that they immigrated to. And that's how you got this guy on screen today. And let me take him down. Let's see, do I have any other good ones? And even this now with that new mayor in New York City, we get this. So KGB agent describing how they performed a psyop to disrupt America, and even his predecessors in the 20s did the same thing. Well, I'm going to leave it there. This was just an alert, a bolo, that the enemies of America are now in America. Watch your back. And with that said, we're going to get on out of here. Mrs. Queen is home. It's time for dinner and to enjoy an adult beverage. As usual, you know, this was kind of a serious topic, so I'm not going to take us out with Ray Rav today, even though his is a very solemn and serious song, but we're going to go out a different way today. So another artist who I have collected music from is a fella named Ash, and the S is actually a $. And he's on Spotify, and I got his permission to use some tracks. So I'm going to use this to take us out. Let's see. I like this one. Because we got a lot to think about. It's a state of emergency.